Now, I have an opening question for you both, since we're waiting for other questions. And my question is, you saw the valuations up there. You guys are both attractive people and companies. I figured, why don't you get together and just get married? I mean, seriously. So you could basically start, you just announced that Arlanda will be a key point for potentially Asian flights. So I'm thinking you could fly east, and then you can fly west to the east coast of the United States. Now, Air Asia flies east to the west coast of America. So basically, between the two of you, you have the world covered. What do you think?
That's a good idea. There are certain barriers, however, there are certain, yes, one of the problems when you look at long-haul operation is, of course, bilateral agreements, because it isn't any, we only have open skies from Europe to the west, but the rest is more or less closed.
What do you think?
Well, it's certainly not a bad idea if we can work something out. That's something that can be done. But our current focus at this point in time is Asia, is ASEAN. We still have a lot of work to do in order to build and strengthen that network in ASEAN and Asia Pacific, especially more into China and into India as well. So I think that would be the primary focus in growing that network first.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I think that was a very diplomatic answer, right? Now, is there a place for full high-fare, full-cost, state-subsidized airlines in this industry?
Yeah, as long as you have, you don't let anybody else access to the market, you can do whatever you like. If you're, and there are a lot of countries that's actually doing that, trying to limit and damaging the whole country, but giving a very good thing for one single airline, and that's damaging to the country, of course, and damaging to people, because you end up with the highest fares in your history.
Yeah.
What is your perspective?
Well, I think based on our experiences, especially in our home market, where you have a full state subsidized airline like Malaysia Airlines, they didn't actually able to actually have a high fares, because essentially they're also competing with the regional airlines, which have a larger network and more frequency in terms of certain routes that they serve. They're essentially competing against the Middle Eastern countries like Emirates or Etihad or Qatar and all that. So it doesn't work that way any longer, and I do not think government would like to continue to subsidize forever, and that's what just happened with Malaysia Airlines. So hence they had to restructure it, and hence the new CEO's main aim is really to stop that bleeding. So hence the reason why they have actually reduced the capacity by reducing frequency and terminate certain routes, and they're relying on their one world alliances. So I think the days where the state government will continue to facilitate and to subsidize the operations is no longer feasible because of the intense competition that you see in the world right now.
Excellent. Now, there's a question here on efficiencies and how we measure, how your respective airlines measure results as it pertains to pilots specifically. The question is, how do you measure the efficiency and result of a pilot?
Well, actually, you can use several tools to measure it. The normal tool is how much productivity each pilot have. That's a very easy way of comparing it. And you are allowed, in Europe, you are allowed to fly 900 hours, then you can't fly anymore. Obviously, the longer distance you fly on average sector, it's easier to get up to that number, but then you have to stop.
From our experience, I mean, we have to create a balance that it doesn't cause fatigue, because that would compromise on safety. We have 1,000 hours that we can have the pilots work on, and the rough calculation in terms of gauging productivity is that we have about 5 sets of pilots per aircraft. So that's how we actually measure our productivity, by have that kind of reference, really. Yeah.
And there's also a question on the, this is more Asia related, and then I have one for you as well. How has the Air Malaysia accident impacted the Asian market specifically, and what are sort of your plans around expansion beyond Asia?
So you're talking about Malaysia Airlines?
Yeah, Malaysia Airlines
okay. Well, when,
accident.
Well, actually, it affected more on the Chinese market when you have that incident of MH370. So therefore, none of the Chinese wanted to fly into Malaysia out of protest. But the thing about Air Asia, we're able to market it in a different manner. Basically, we use our different channels to say that, you know, there are ways to come. I mean, you can come over to Kota Kinabalu or Kuching, which is Borneo, which is also part of Malaysia, but they don't really see it directly linked to Malaysia. But we leverage on our marketing efforts in different markets for them to get into the network of Air Asia, and therefore they can go on multiple cities, not necessarily just Malaysia. Yeah.
Good. Now, any thoughts on open skies? What is going on? There certainly has been, there's certainly signs that it still costs money to fly over Russia. So what are we seeing on that? What's going on?
It's strange. We allow all the Russians to fly over Scandinavia, but we from Scandinavia are limited to fly over Russia, and if you do, you have to pay a hell of a lot of money. So why don't we close? It should be an eye for an eye, and and so on. So if the Russian doesn't allow us to fly over, why should we let the Russian fly over to the US? So, I don't think the politicians have been brave enough to take that philosophy. But I think that could be a very good philosophy to follow. Equal terms, equal ability to fly through the airspace. And it's of course crazy. This is a typical thing that you will see all over. For a limited time, you can have the competitors. They will try to close the airspace, so they limit for airlines like we and Air Asia that we go for low fares and high volume, and they go for high fares and low volume. So there is a contradiction here, you see.
And you mentioned very briefly the prospect potentially for an open sky resolution in Asia. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it was supposed to achieve last year, but that hasn't happened because of the 3 countries, Laos, Indonesia, and Philippines, where they agreed verbally, but they haven't actually fully ratified by going through the documentations and actually signing it. So we hope that will happen by this year. But when that happens also, unfortunately, it won't be as a full open skies as how you see in Europe. It only just limits to the 5th freedom. So therefore, it's still better than what we actually have right now, basically. But having just an open skies is not enough. You need to have a single aviation market that facilitates and achieve the full potential of open skies.
So I have a last question, and it's a long question, and we have 1 minute and 27 seconds. So I ask you both to be extremely clear on this one. It's often shown that a train beats flying if the travel time is below 3 hours. Now, pros and cons of flying for those distances, in your mind?
Yeah, if you have a large catchment area, a high density of population, and short sectors, obviously you should go by train. You will see, I think, it will cost too much to build trains on where you don't have a high enough population, like Norway and like also to a large extent Sweden. But in the center of Europe, obviously they should do it. But you will have more than enough on going on the longer routes.
Oh, thank you.
At the end of the day, I think it's pricing that will determine it. Point to point, I guess 3 hours train would be ideal for business travelers, but of course naturally it comes at a higher price than if you were to fly through a low-cost carrier. A good example would be the Channel Tunnel from London to Paris. That's probably about £200 one way basically, but you can probably fly London to Paris in £50 or something of that sort. So it really depends on the segment of markets you're targeting. I think both can actually coexist.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank our participants, CEOs, Bjørn Kjos and Aireen Omar. Thank you so much for your sportiness of taking this Q&A on the fly. Thanks.